What if I told you that one of the most transformative alliances shaping the future of the Middle East is quietly unfolding, largely unnoticed by much of the world, and that it could redraw the global balance of power for generations to come? While global headlines tend to obsess over high-profile summits, sanctions, or moments of open conflict, a much quieter, yet potentially more consequential economic and geopolitical revolution is taking place, driven by two partners whose cooperation would have seemed improbable only a few decades ago: China and Iran. But is this emerging partnership a clever strategy for mutual survival and stability, or a ticking time bomb that could upend the established international order? To answer this, we need to look much deeper than the surface. We need to travel back through history, follow the money, and listen to the whispers in the corridors of global power. Let's set the stage. Picture the ancient Silk Road, winding across mountains and deserts, linking imperial China with the Persian Empire. For more than 2 millennia, the trade in silk, spices, ceramics, and precious metals bound these civilizations together, not just in commerce, but in culture, science, and even philosophy. Persian poets and Chinese scholars exchanged ideas centuries before the modern nation-state was born. This legacy of exchange and interaction, interrupted by wars and changing empires, never truly disappeared. It simply evolved. Fast forward to the 21st century. The world is more connected than ever, but it is also riven by new forms of rivalry and competition. Both China and Iran now find themselves increasingly at odds with the dominant force of the post-World War II era: the United States. For Iran, decades of punishing sanctions, economic isolation, and political pressure have pushed it to seek new friends and lifelines. For China, the relentless drive for resources, markets, and global influence has led it to look west, towards the energy-rich, strategically vital Middle East. It is here, in the crossroads of ancient trade and modern geopolitics, that the China-Iran partnership is being reborn. The numbers tell a striking story. In the early years of the 21st century, China was only a modest trading partner for Iran. But as sanctions tightened, especially after the United States' withdrawal from the Iran nuclear deal, most countries and companies pulled back, fearing American penalties. China moved in the opposite direction. By the year 2024, China had become Iran's single largest trading partner, with total commerce between the two nations surpassing $34 billion annually. That is not just a record figure for Iran's sanctions era. It is a lifeline, and at the heart of this trade is oil. According to analysts, China now purchases nearly 90% of all Iranian oil exports, a staggering proportion by any standard. This means that almost every barrel of oil leaving Iran's ports finds its way to Chinese refineries, fueling not only China's massive industrial machine, but also providing Tehran with the hard currency and resources it needs to keep its economy afloat. In July of the year 2025, despite ongoing American efforts to choke off this trade, China continued to import Iranian oil, using a dizzying array of methods, ship-to-ship transfers, shell companies, and non-dollar currencies to evade detection and sanctions. This is not just economic pragmatism, it is strategic defiance. But oil is only the beginning. In March of the year 2021, China and Iran signed a comprehensive 25-year cooperation agreement, the so-called Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. This deal is sweeping in its ambition. It sets out frameworks for collaboration not just in energy, but in infrastructure, transportation, technology, banking, and even security. Under the umbrella of China's Belt and Road Initiative, billions of dollars are earmarked for projects: modernizing Iran's ports, building high-speed rail links, expanding telecommunications networks, and creating new logistics corridors that can carry goods and, perhaps, military material across the region. Let's pause and consider what this means. These are not just commercial projects. Experts warn that some of China's investments and technology transfers have dual-use potential. For example, the same logistics networks that speed up the movement of consumer goods can also move troops or weapons. There have been credible reports that China has supplied Iran with materials and know-how for ballistic missile programs, advanced cyber capabilities, and surveillance technologies. The line between economic development and military empowerment becomes increasingly blurred. In this context, the partnership is a high-stakes balancing act. As one seasoned Middle East analyst put it, China is walking a diplomatic tightrope, supporting Iran just enough to counterbalance Western pressure, but never so much as to provoke direct confrontation with the United States or to alienate other powerful actors like Saudi Arabia and Israel. Let's unpack that further. China's ambitions in the Middle East are vast, but they are not reckless. Beijing wants access to energy, new markets for its technology and construction giants, and a seat at the table for shaping the region's future. But China is also deeply pragmatic. It needs stability in the Persian Gulf to keep its economy running. It does not want to be dragged into someone else's war, nor to see its investments go up in smoke. That is why, as China deepens its ties with Iran, it is also quietly courting other regional heavyweights, signing deals with Saudi Arabia, investing in Israel's tech sector, and even offering to mediate between rivals. On the Iranian side, the calculus is equally complex. For Tehran, China is more than just a customer. It is a partner of last resort, a hedge against Western isolation. Chinese investments allow Iran to bypass sanctions, sell oil using alternative currencies like the yuan or the euro, and access global technology networks that would otherwise be closed off. This influx of capital and know-how is not just propping up the Iranian economy. It is enabling Iran to modernize its infrastructure, develop domestic industries, and, crucially, fund its security apparatus. In the past few years, Iran has conducted joint military exercises with both China and Russia in the Gulf of Oman, signaling a new level of strategic alignment. Let's focus for a moment on the ripple effects. As China's economic presence in Iran grows, so too does its diplomatic clout. Chinese diplomats now play a more active role in regional forums and security dialogues. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization, once a largely Central Asian affair, is evolving into a platform for Middle Eastern security cooperation. With Iran's admission as a full member, the SACO could become the region's go-to security club, potentially challenging the dominance of Western alliances like NATO and the United States-led Gulf partnerships. But with every opportunity comes a shadow of risk. Western officials and many regional actors worry that China's economic lifelines are enabling Iran's more controversial activities. There is mounting evidence that support from Beijing, whether in the form of technology, capital, or diplomatic cover, has made it easier for Tehran to pursue its ballistic missile program, to support allies and proxies across Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, and to resist international pressure for reform. One Western intelligence official summarized the concern bluntly: China's investments are changing the rules of the game in the Middle East, tilting the balance of power in ways that threaten stability. Let's look at some concrete examples. In the summer of the year 2025, Iranian President Ibrahim Raisi met with the Iraqi Prime Minister to discuss expanding economic cooperation and regional security. These talks, while couched in the language of trade and development, were also about forging a bloc of states less dependent on the West and more open to Chinese influence. At the same time, trade between Iran and China is increasingly conducted in non-dollar currencies, bypassing the American financial system and reducing Iran's vulnerability to sanctions. This trend is part of a broader Chinese strategy to chip away at the dominance of the dollar in global trade, a move with potentially seismic consequences for the world economy. Now, let's zoom out. What does all this mean for ordinary people in the Middle East or anywhere else? First, energy markets are already feeling the impact. With China buying nearly all Iranian oil, Tehran has less incentive to compromise with Western powers. This dynamic can lead to abrupt shifts in oil prices, which ripple through everything from gas stations in Los Angeles to electricity bills in Tokyo. Second, the Belt and Road Initiative's projects are reshaping transportation and trade patterns across Eurasia, creating new economic opportunities, but also new dependencies. Countries that once looked to the United States or Europe for investment may now find themselves tied, both economically and politically, to Beijing. For business leaders, investors, and policymakers, the message is clear. Keeping a close eye on China's expanding footprint in the Middle East is no longer optional. It is essential. The next wave of economic growth, or financial instability, could well emerge from this China-Iran axis. For tech companies, the stakes are high. Chinese-backed telecom networks in Iran could provide a backdoor for surveillance or cyber operations, raising new challenges for data security and digital sovereignty. For defense planners, the growing interoperability between Chinese, Russian, and Iranian armed forces is a potential game-changer, challenging decades of American military dominance in the region. But there is another, subtler side to this story. Not all observers believe that the China-Iran partnership is a recipe for disaster. Some argue that China's deep economic stake in Middle Eastern stability may actually make it a force for calm. If Beijing's primary objective is a predictable and profitable marketplace, It may use its growing leverage to prevent open conflict, acting as a mediator or even a peace broker. There are already early signs of this. In recent years, China has offered to facilitate talks between Iran and Saudi Arabia and has called for negotiated solutions to regional crises. Still, this is a delicate and risky dance. If China pushes too hard in favor of Iran, it risks alienating other key partners like Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, or Israel, all countries with whom China also has extensive economic interests. If it stands back, it could find its investments threatened by war or instability. And as the United States increasingly pivots toward other regions or grapples with its own domestic challenges, the vacuum in the Middle East could pull China further and further in, perhaps even against Beijing's own preferences. Let's explore some possible scenarios for the next decade. In one scenario, Chinese investments help Iran modernize, boosting its economy and creating new jobs, leading to greater integration with its neighbors. The Belt and Road Initiative brings new railways, highways, and digital infrastructure to the region, and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization becomes a hub for cooperative security. In this world, China acts as a stabilizer, leveraging its economic power to encourage compromise and keep regional rivalries in check. But there is also a darker scenario. In this version, China's continued support emboldens Tehran to double down on its most controversial policies, developing advanced missile systems, supporting militant groups, and challenging rivals across the region. Other Middle Eastern powers, feeling threatened, ramp up their own military spending and look for new alliances, perhaps turning to Russia, or even rekindling ties with the United States. The risk of proxy conflicts, cyber attacks, and direct confrontations rises. The world could see not just a new Cold War, but a series of hot conflicts, sparked in part by the very economic lifelines that were meant to promote stability. There are also questions about the durability of the China-Iran partnership itself. Some experts believe that, beneath the surface rhetoric of strategic partnership, the relationship is more transactional than heartfelt. In the words of one veteran diplomat, "For China, Iran is a useful node, a way to check Western influence and secure energy supplies. But Beijing is not in the business of making friends for life. If the costs outweigh the benefits, China could shift course, leaving Iran exposed." This raises a critical point. The fate of this alliance will be shaped not just by the decisions of leaders in Beijing and Tehran, but by the broader currents of global change. If the United States and its allies develop new tools for enforcing sanctions, or if alternative energy sources reduce the world's dependence on Middle Eastern oil, the incentives for partnership could shift dramatically. Conversely, if global institutions weaken and multipolarity becomes the norm, the China-Iran axis could become a template for other emerging coalitions. What practical lessons can viewers draw from all this? First, recognize that the lines between economics, technology, and security are blurrier than ever. Decisions about where to build a port, which currency to use in trade, or which telecom provider to choose are not just technical or financial, they are deeply geopolitical. Second, keep an eye on how new alliances are forming, often under the radar, reshaping markets and security environments in ways that can affect everything from your job prospects to the price of food at your local supermarket. For investors, this means paying close attention to the risks and opportunities in sectors connected to energy, infrastructure, and high technology. For students and young professionals, it means understanding that the skills of the future will be shaped by these global shifts, whether in languages, international law, or cybersecurity. For policymakers and activists, it means thinking creatively about how to promote stability and cooperation in a world where old certainties are breaking down. And for everyone else, it is a reminder that the most important changes often happen quietly, in the shadows of official speeches and diplomatic ceremonies. When you see a news story about oil prices spiking, a new railway opening in Central Asia, or a cyber attack on a financial institution, remember, these are not isolated events. They are the visible ripples of deeper currents shaped, in part, by the China-Iran partnership. So where does all this leave us? The China-Iran alliance is more than just a business deal or a diplomatic handshake. It is a symbol of a world in flux, where old alliances are being tested, new powers are rising, and the lines between friend and rival are constantly shifting. Whether this partnership leads to greater prosperity and peace, or to new forms of tension and conflict, depends on countless decisions yet to be made. In Tehran, in Beijing, in Washington, and in capitals around the globe. Here is a parting thought. In the game of international politics, alliances are rarely static. Today's partner can be tomorrow's competitor. The China-Iran relationship may be strong now, but it is built on interests, not ideals. As the stakes rise, will Beijing double down, or will it pull back when things get too hot? Will Iran find itself empowered, or dangerously overexposed? Now, I want to hear from you. Do you think the China-Iran partnership is a force for stability, or a recipe for disaster? Could China's growing involvement in the Middle East usher in a new era of peace and development? Or will it simply fuel an arms race and new conflicts? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis helpful, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more in-depth explorations of global economics and technology. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes, the world's biggest shifts happen quietly.